So how many of you are entrepreneurs in this audience? How many of you want to become entrepreneurs? Okay. And what has been the biggest challenge? Money? Okay. So here we have a panel which has a mix of people who have raised capital, who incubate companies and get them ready to raise capital, and someone who's looking at how to raise capital using newer mediums other than the regular ones. So let's start off with first asking them to introduce themselves and talk about their experiences from the capital raise.
Yeah, I'm Acharya, and as I mentioned in the morning, I have 2 startups. The first startup is about 14 years old, and in the first company, which was Awesomum, which I started in 2000, we went from being a very small company in the bioinformatics space towards being very, very ambitious, and in the year 2005, went and acquired a company in Germany. And after that, when we went in 2006 and 2007, we did 2 more acquisitions, one in the Netherlands and the other in the US. And during those period of doing those 2 acquisitions, we raised 2 rounds of capital, amounting to more than $20 million. The first round was a very difficult, interesting round, which we did with the IFC, or the World Bank. And it was done as it was extended over a period of 18 months, but it eventually happened. The second was also a very interesting raise that we did, which was done with a public company in the US. And we had to raise a large amount of money to be able to acquire this company in a very short period of time. So that was also an interesting experience. So these are the 2 things that we did with the first company. In the second new startup, we're just about to close, and a very different form of capital raise, which is going to be more of individual investors as a pre-Series A, hoping towards the next Series A. So that sort of summarizes what we did. I can happy to expand on some of that if you want later.
So perhaps before we pass on to the next, so I just want to fact, while you did speak about the higher capital raise, if you could just perhaps dwell on the first capital raise, which may have been the smallest chunk, because a lot of folks in this audience who are looking to raise capital might be in the start.
Is the current one or the current? So this time we, since Mapmygenome is barely a year and a half, one of the things we looked at this point was saying, this is a consumer company and it really needs to expand from in a different way, right? We need to have distribution networks across different parts of the world, whether it's Singapore, whether it's the US, whether it's other parts. So we said, instead of going the conventional private equity route, which is what I did in the previous companies, one of the things was to say, how do we get the right kind of ambassadors for us to be able to help us expand the business first? So what we did was a very interesting form of raising capital, and I think this is becoming relatively common. It is very common in the US as a ways of being able to raise capital, which is a convertible note. So what we did was to be able to create a convertible note towards Series A. So the hope was that get smaller amounts of capital put in by individuals who can help build the company, who become your brand ambassadors in many forms, and then subsequently then raise the larger round of capital.
Shereen, could you speak about how do you prepare your companies for capital raise, and what kind of capitals do you
Hello, my name is Sirine. I manage a technology startup incubator and accelerator at Dubai Silicon Oasis, Government of Dubai. So we actually do invest in seed stage technology entrepreneurs and startups. We have a very selective process. So we look into teams, ideas, the technology behind this idea, how scalable the business is. And we actually not only not only businesses with prototypes or established entrepreneurs who actually are interested in Bella. We invited her to actually present to our committee, and we're considering accelerating her business idea and her team whenever she's ready. How we prepare them? Basically, what we are interested in is mostly the team. Regardless of the gender. So females and males, we coach them and we go through the process with them equally, the same way. So we look into how passionate they are about this idea, why are they doing what they want to do, what their exit strategy is, and this is actually a very important question because it actually tells a lot about the motivation to start a business. And then we obviously coach them on business planning, financial planning, pitching skills. We work with them a lot on how to present their ideas to investors, whether us to start with. We do have an external investment committee, so we invite our partners from SAP, Microsoft, Google, and so on. And they have 10 to 15 minutes to impress them. And there's a lot of work on that, on the quality of the presentation, on the content, and the presentation skills as well. Yeah, that's basically it. There's a lot of coaching. We work a lot. We take at least 2 months to work on polishing the presentation itself, the content, obviously. We don't look too much into financials because it's either a pre-seed or seed stage. But we make sure that the technology behind is well defined. The market research is done properly and detailed. And the team, the founders or the co-founders are the right people to run this business.
Yes, hello. My name is Shereen. I come from Egypt. I have helped many startups in Egypt start their own businesses. Unlike what others think that maybe because we're a very big country, that means that we have lots of VCs. It's actually not true. The truth is, like 80% of the people I've helped raise capital, they raise it amongst their own pockets and their parents and their friends. And they take their share of the risk, of course. Others go to incubators, but I was just discussing this with Sirine. We have back home, we have incubators that work very good to a certain stage where they need real funds, and then it's not accessible, or if it is accessible, it's very poor. You end up leaving the business because you need more money into it. There are a few lucky guys who get an investor through a large incubator. But then they don't control their own business, and eventually it becomes like, I don't know to name some of the startups I worked with, but some of them actually are entirely out of their own business. They have sold it, and now they do feel unhappy because they sold it very cheap, actually. So I was last year I was in Europe for a workshop on crowdfunding. I started meeting with new people from Africa. Some of the platforms I can remember. It's called Foundar. They are basically trying to raise money through crowdfunding. I would like to know if anybody here has been on a crowdfunding platform or tried to raise money by this way. Anyone? Kickstarter? No, nobody. Well. In the beginning, you have to go and find a crowdfunding platform. Kickstarter is like the most famous. They have limits, of course, and you have to see if it's allowed to go through your country, because some crowdfunding platforms does not allow it. And then you have to go sign up and see how much you can actually raise as a fund. I don't want to elaborate more because maybe you have other questions, but I'll come back later to, if I have time, tell you how to do it exactly. Thank you.
So on the question of, you spoke about the capital that you raised at initial stages, and you spoke about the incubation stage. typically incubators, or when you're preparing for your pitch, Excel makes it very easy to show a large scale. You just have to pull it, you can multiply it 3, 10, 50 times, and it's so easy to show that scalability. And especially if you are an incubator, you also, or if you're an investment banker, you would tell the entrepreneur that put in as much as possible, right? But when the investor comes across and starts asking you questions, there's always a mismatch between what the entrepreneur can articulate about the realistic scale they can achieve and what's on the Excel sheets or the business plans. Could you all share your experiences of the risks, the challenges that you would need to face if you really have to look at that kind of a scale versus being realistic, and where do you see the trade-off between wanting to show, yeah, you will be large and hence attract large investors, versus being realistic and saying that, yeah, I think this is what I can do? Could you all share your experiences of what would you recommend that the entrepreneur should do?
Sure. So I think second time you become more realistic. let me be honest. So the first time, I think you get into. I think it's a function of your age and experience and other things. But I think for instance, the first time when I would do projections, a lot of the unseen variables, and I can get extremely analytical about being able to get to where the numbers that I am. But the realities of business are much more complicated than an Excel spreadsheet. And I think that's the most interesting thing. I still remember this one line that I met one investor, and he never invested in a company, but there was this one interesting thing that I liked about it. And we had this discussion about saying, and this is towards after almost completed the first one, right? Saying, a lot of times we look at Excel spreadsheets. Why is it that we spend a lot of time and energy in trying to articulate, put every variable down there, including the employee cost, including anything that you can actually physically encapsulate in terms of being able to create a model. But what is it that ultimately your business is not necessarily going to go exactly the way you project, and businesses are not run on Excel spreadsheets. And I think one thing interesting that he said was that we would like to invest in companies that do not follow a standard trajectory, and you look at these outliers, right? And I think that was an interesting observation to hear from somebody who was accomplished and had done this for many years. So for me, the first time, I think, was over-optimistic, and I wanted to make sure that you also project that image. But what I've realized is, like relationships and like everything else, I think it's very important to manage expectations. And therefore, now I've become much more realistic, so I discount my own thinking and then show it. I think that takes some effort, because as being an entrepreneur, you're naturally optimistic. You naturally have a tendency to be able to scale things up, because in your mind, you do scale it up. And if you can't think that much, then you will not achieve that. So I think it's a question of being able to get to that right number where it is where you can manage the expectations of your future investors.
How flexible they are in terms of taking risks. You have incubators and accelerators in Silicon Valley who don't even want to listen to you talk about financials. They would tell you, don't even show me your financials. Go to market, launch your product, specifically in technology, and let's look at financials and worry about financials later on. Some would tell you, don't even look at revenues. Go dominate the market. Launch your app, for instance, free of charge. And once you dominate the market, that competition would be irrelevant. Then we'll find a way to monetize it. When you look at all the big success stories, from Facebook to Twitter and so on, we still don't know if they're actually making any revenues or not, and how they're making those revenues. Everything is still under the table. Now in the Middle East, it's a different story, because we do not have those big success stories. We do not have exits, and we do not have a lot of funds. So the way we work with our entrepreneurs, we do need to look into their financials and details. We need to know what their burn rate is, for how long would the fund, whatever fund we put in this company will last. Even if it's only estimation, it's very important to actually narrow it down as much as possible, which requires extensive knowledge of the market, the competition, the pricing, the target market, and so on. Which is, again, why our selection process is quite selective and long, because we really need to look into all these details. We do want them to succeed. We cannot have this mentality of let's massively invest, and if 1 out of 10 succeed, we're happy. We're not there yet. So never oversell. It's just as if you're having a job interview. Don't exaggerate, because the reality will show very quickly, and at some point you will underperform what you oversold, let's say.
So before she, just one fact that both of you spoke about the fact that you should not oversell this. Have you seen any biases between the way in which men would pitch versus what women would pitch, or even the investors themselves? Do you see any differences the way that you get evaluated?
I do. I see that women are much more realistic, and that's also quite cultural, because in our part of the world we have a big issue with failure. So we see, and specifically it's we see that more in men, that they oversell and it's not exaggerate. They cannot do simple things. They always need to have add-ons to prove that they can actually do a lot of things. Whereas if they go to the US and they do the same pitch, and some of our startups, they face the same problem, that investors would tell them, keep it simple. Tell me one thing that you know how to do and you do it well, and don't oversell. Whereas the females, what we see is that they're very, very focused, and they focus on what they do, and they want to do it well, and they want to succeed as soon as possible. So we do see the difference.
So would you advise that if women are pitching to men, then they should perhaps push it up a bit? Be realistic, try to be realistic. If you see that the expectations on the other side is that are you chest thumping, then do a bit of chest thumping as well. It's important, yeah, period, yeah. So since we're short of time, could we just round up with maybe some tips on what, so one we said in terms of how they should pitch, but what kinds of capital and what are the sources that they should go to, whether their own funds versus taking external funds. So could all three of you share?
And sustain the business as much as possible that they can. Probably you'll tell us more about crowd investing.
Well, my advice is, if you're not going to raise up the capital by yourself, go crowdfunding. First thing, it will cost minimum as regards money-wise. Second thing, statistically, if you got funded on a crowdfunding platform, in like 50% of cases, a VC will have a look at your project. Actually, many of the crowdfunding will only supply like 100,000. If you need $1 million, the $1 million will come when the VCs and the capital see that you can raise the fund by yourself, and that you have been successful in collaborating and in conveying the message. For me, I don't want to like publicize every single crowdfunding sources, but you can try for a start. If you're creative enough, go for Kickstarter. If you want to raise capital for a personal, like a personal project, like you are an artist or you want to do a movie or to do an animation, you need some money, not too much, and Indiegogo will be great. If you decide to do any crowdfunding, just if you're going to invest in a good movie, a good short movie showing you doing whatever you intend to do in like as much as possible concise way. Be specific. Ask people for money at the end. Do not ask for a certain amount. Do not let people will not expect that you give them a share. That's the nice thing about the crowdfunding. They just expect you to say thank you because you contributed. If everybody gives you like 10 dirhams and the 10 dirhams comes from 10,000 people, you will raise your capital in no time. Just have the confidence and have someone who's really, really great in making videos, and good luck with that.
So I think that there are 2-3 things that I would at least do. One is if you don't need the money, maybe it depends on the kind of business you're running, that even if you don't need the money, that's the time you should raise the money. So that is tip number one. If in today's world, I think a lot of times you want to reach a certain scale. And if you don't have the money to be able to do that, your competitors are going to come and do that before you. So that is an important trade-off you want to see. The second thing is that if you can fund it yourself, and you can wait for some time till you get to a certain stage, do it. But I would still say that if you really at a point where you need to scale, it is definitely a good idea to be able to get in external capital, because they will also help you scale that business from both a strategy point of view as well as giving you the ability to have a longer time to have the burn. Given that, I think the other thing that I would strongly advise is to actually spend a lot of time researching who your investors are, because it makes a big difference. You have to live many years with them, and being able, if you can't get along, I think that would be a big problem for all of us. So those would be the 3 things that I would.
I totally agree. I wanted to add actually at this point is that it's very, very important to research and be very selective when you choose the investor, even if it's just an incubator and they're going to incubate it for a year, because you need a smart investment and have a strategic partner on board. So yeah, it is very important. And I was an entrepreneur myself, and I've secured investment from a Saudi angel investor, but I failed when negotiating the deal because they wanted 75% of my company. And you can imagine what kind of partnership I would have with this investor starting with those terms. So really be very, very strong, defend your business model, defend your idea, defend your valuation, and defend why you want to keep majority in your company. That's very important as well.
Great, thank you. So I'll just sum up with saying that one, think big, because if you don't think big, somebody will come and take that area. So think big, but be realistic in terms of how and when you will reach that. So start planning for it. Plan for what is the money that you will require for reaching that. But you don't need to get all the money in first shot. Try different sources. It could be your own family funds. It could be in terms of crowdfunding. But also try to look out for who are the large investors who are going to help you achieve that dream, the large dream. And in addition to that, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact any of us, and I'm sure we'll be able to do this. But go out, achieve your dreams, become more, let's have more women entrepreneurs. The next time for Jan 2016, we should have 50 entrepreneurs in this room. Yep. Thank you, guys.